You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I'm my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, I'm back. It's good to be back on the show. I really appreciate Eric getting to step in there for me, but it's good to be back. I always miss when we don't get to record together, man.
Hey, doing pretty well, Carl. Can't complain too much. You know, it's feeling like fall out here. Broncos being 0-3 stinks, but hey, we were expecting, kind of a up and down season with so many new variables, so can't get too high, can't get too low. That's key. And honestly, I thought that it was considering the Broncos lost the turnover battle 3-0 against one of arguably the best looking teams in football to start the season. I'm not too upset. And
it was on the road in one of the toughest places to play.
Lambeau's tough.
So, really, they were in that game if you take out the turnovers. Really, they win that game if it's not for the turnovers. That's the reality of the situation there. And, turnovers are part of the game, unfortunately. But the Broncos have some things to clean up, but it's at least nice this year. They're in every game so far. They at least
absolutely.
They at least stand a chance. So we'll get into that a little bit here. And there's still a lot of positives to look forward to this season. Only one team ends up actually winning the whole thing. So 31 other teams have to be disappointed in some way, somehow. And so you have to find other ways to really enjoy the season. So we'll talk about that, kind of give you some things to be watching for. But we also want to make sure that you're following us on Twitter, just because, there's so many reasons. Nick has so many memes that he posts, of course. But beyond that, there's a lot of great football content. And so you can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition in Sports Illustrated. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Well, as always here, Nick, we always like to take some stock of this past game and try to look at the positives and the negatives. Because, no matter what happens, no matter if they win by 40 or if they lose by 40, there's still going to be positives and negatives in a game. And so looking at some individual players here, who is one player that really just stood out to you in a very positive way in this past game?
Well, for me, a big one had to be the rookie, Dalton Risner. He's becoming a common guy on this stock up and stock down, and he just continues to climb up. He had an up and down game week 2 against, Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman. That's going to happen. That Bears defensive front, that Bears defense in general, talent-wise, is about as good as it is. And, he had his ups and downs there. It's going to happen. And the Packers defensive front also is pretty darn good. Didn't go up one-on-one against Kenny Clark as much as Connor McGovern did, but, there's some combo blocks there. And, Rashawn Gary, the likes of, stunts, twists and stunts against both Smiths, Montravius Adams, etc. Risner played well, and, not the best game from Garrett Bowles, no holds, sure. And McGovern had his hands full. Risner really stood up, so I'm just been impressed with him each passing week, and it looks like the Broncos, at least Elway, can kind of start to put to bed a little bit of his negative narratives out there, as far as can't draft offensive linemen, although, obviously drafted parodies, Orlando Franklin, some other guys as well, but whatever. And also can't draft in the second round. So Dalton Risner, that's a twofer in that regard, and he looks like he is, man, he's really been impressive. So I'm very much buying stock in Dalton Risner right now as his stock continues to climb. This might be as low as it ever is, as he just keeps moving up.
Well, you always hate to focus on just one play, but his throwing Lindsay into the end zone.
Who wants it?
That might be one of the biggest and greatest heads-up plays I've seen in a long time. I mean, just to understand where you are, understand it's fourth down, you have to score, and your running back is stalled. So I'm just going to grab the guy and pretty much throw him into the end zone. When I watched that play live, I just burst out laughing. And I was in the vehicle driving home from Nebraska. And, oh my goodness, my wife was like, what happened? I said, a guy just threw a running back into the end zone. And she's like,
sidebar here. I've heard this before on like other podcasts and shows. Would you ever be a fan of, this is way sidebar. This is a sidebar. But let's say you have an offensive goal line package with a little person.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some big old strong offensive linemen back there. You snap the ball and you have those offensive linemen pick up that little person and just chuck them 10 feet in the air into the end zone. I mean,
you got injury concerns for the little guy?
Probably. I mean, but here's $1 million.
I guess.
There's an injury concern for anybody out there.
Right. So you just have yourself a 140-pound soaking wet kind of player. And, of course, you're a 330-pound offensive lineman and say, yep, throw this guy. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's – after watching Risner
that's very
do that,
Mike Leachy. Like, that's just crazy conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat going on. But, my God, I would – can you imagine?
Well, I mean, just for those kind of situations, man, I mean, where you have to have a touchdown, it would be a nice little package to have for sure. And teams just be like, we can't do anything to stop that.
I mean, unless they have guys jumping 7 feet in the air.
Right.
But, I mean, even if you can get a small kicker, maybe. So you're earning your worth today. We're using you in there. Just chuck Brandon McManus over the goal line. So anyway, we should probably get back on track here. It's a funny visualization, and Risner picking up the little guy that is Lindsay and chucking him over the goal line.
Right.
One heart by Risner, but also made me think of that.
Right. No, that would be an interesting concept, but I don't see it happening in the NFL anytime soon. But still, again, just showing the intelligence and the understanding of situations for a rookie. That's just downright impressive. And like I said, just a great pick for the Broncos, and another great pick that's really starting to show up much more than I really thought. I mean, during training camp, watching this guy, I wasn't as impressed as I was hoping to be. But so far this season, Courtland Sutton. I mean, one could argue he's been the best weapon for the Broncos so far in 3 games. And I mean, Sanders had his game last game. But Courtland Sutton, he's had 2 out of the 3 games where he just really stood out. And even the Bears game in the fourth quarter, he was making 4th down catches, picking up first downs, knowing right where the line is, just showing advanced things as a receiver that last year were not even close. And I'm liking this guy. He's really starting to look like a true number 1 receiver for the Broncos. And I mean, he's still got a little ways to go. I'm not saying he's emerged that he is that guy right now, but I think he's better than I thought he was going to be.
Absolutely. You know, he's flashing each week. I mean, averaging over 80 yards a game. And the thing that's really impressing me is that the deep jump ball, you know, as far as outside the hash marks, they've had a couple opportunities there, but he's winning not just that way. It's after the catch. It's over the middle. He's doing a better job being lower in and out of his breaks. So, you know, he's given defenders a smaller surface area, defensive backs to punch. So just all that stuff is really going into him emerging as, I mean, potentially the focal point of the passing offense. You know, obviously, you still have Sanders going against Jair Alexander, who's emerging to be one of the best young cornerbacks in football. So he was pretty much negated in this game. And Joe Flacco missed some opportunities out there. Granted, the offensive line wasn't doing the best on the edges against the Packers' formidable front. So, you know, again, you can't. I'm not expecting Flacco to make Patrick Mahomes throws out there. But some meat was left on the bone. So Sutton's really impressing me. He's an X. He's good.
The throw that really I remember is the one where where Joe Flacco threw it out of bounds, and Courtland Sutton caught it, but it could only get 1 foot down. And he had his guy beat. And all Flacco had to do was throw it up the field, and it's a touchdown. Instead, he threw it out of bounds. And, I mean, like I said, Sutton still caught the ball, but it was out of bounds. And I was just thinking, man, that he was open. He had a couple steps on his guy, just perfect setup play, and just missed it. And that's just kind of maybe the tail of the tape of the first 3 games. Close misses. this team is right there. I mean, you think about the Freeman touchdown that gets called back from a holding penalty. Courtland Sutton missing that touchdown there. I mean, it just little things here and there that just make the huge difference when it comes to winning games or now being 0-3.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. And again, it's good to see two young guys, 2 second-round picks at that, as our first stock up and stock down. So the Broncos aren't there yet, but we have young players improving and starting to fill valuable roles on this team. And that's just in 2 draft classes. You got to start stacking 3, 4 in complement of that free agency as well. So, it's definitely a team. Might not see it in the wins and losses this year, but the future, especially on the offense. I mean, 2 offensive players as well. The future on offense is trending in the right direction, which is it's really a sight for sore eyes. But unfortunately, the other side of the ball and the other end of the spectrum of youth, a guy who's stock down for me this week, he had an up and down game, in my opinion. Chris Harris Jr., he's talking big game. He's still great out there, but I don't think that he is doing the best as far as his run support to start the season, whether that be still kind of getting all the kinks together in this defense, or honestly, maybe even making some business decisions. I don't want to accuse anybody of that, but he's not playing as aggressive in run support as I've seen in the past, which is a concern. So, it's Chris Harris Jr., man. We'll see. Hopefully he'll pick it up here soon. I mean, he's going up against number ones. He's trailing those guys, and they're not really throwing at him when Yadam's out there. But still, like the All-22 and everything, he's just not played to the level that I had hoped.
Yeah.
So hopefully he'll turn it around. Not only for his sake, because I'm a Chris Harris Jr. fan, love the dude, want him to keep excelling, but also for the Broncos' sake. I mean, he's better, the defense is better, but also maybe if the Broncos do continue to fall off, they might be able to get, squeeze 1 extra round value of pick out of him if he's playing better than he has in these past couple games.
Right. Yeah, like I said, he's not giving up many catches, but that doesn't mean he's out there destroying people. It's just a lot of teams. Who are you going to throw against? Harris or Bosby and Yadam?
Yeah, but also this is a stock report, so we're having to take these guys' stocks from where they're at.
Right.
So if like Garrett Bowles is on the stock up report, well, his stock couldn't have been much lower than it was last week. If Chris Harris Jr. is stock down, well, he's got top 10 level cornerback stock. So it's just, it's relative to where they were at coming into it.
I had to check our notes real quick to make sure you didn't put Bowles on here.
I thought about it.
I did
but
too,
it was
actually.
Low bar.
Right, exactly. I mean, when you go from a game where you hold, 4 or 5 times, and
he's probably still holding.
Right. And so, but I'm going to go the other side of it here, Elijah Wilkinson. And, I mean, this is a guy the Broncos are going to have to depend on a lot here this season, whether it be when right now right tackle or when James gets back, if he maybe moves to that left tackle spot. I mean, you really can't make the argument that right now he's playing any better than Bowles. He gave up 3 sacks this last game. One of them was that strip sack around the end zone where they gave up that late touchdown in the first half. And just it looked like they were finally getting some momentum. Maybe they could go drive down a little bit, get a field goal right before the half, have the ball to start the second half, just looking so great. And then boom, strip sack leads to a touchdown for the Packers. And to me, that was truly the turning of the game. That one play. I mean, the Broncos really climbed back into that game, and then that happens. And so just not a great game for him. He did okay in the run game, but pass game, he just really got destroyed out there.
Yeah, no, he struggled. And honestly, it's ground zero. He didn't hold, but he still struggled out there. So the way the season is going, it's probably one of those things where you're going to have to sink or swim. And hopefully he continues to get better with his pass technique as he doesn't hold. It's kind of like with Yadam, too. He's been struggling, but you need to evaluate where he's at, right? And you have to give him a chance to go out there and make a mistake and get back out there. I mean, this team isn't competing for the Super Bowl right now, folks. So getting those guys out there and learning what you have in them, letting them grow, watching them improve or not improve, that's all very valuable information that they're going to have to use. So I agree with you, and he struggled. I've mentioned it to Eric before, but really, he looks like a guard playing tackle. right? Like, he just doesn't have incredible length, the footwork. I mean, when you watch Bowles move compared to Wilkinson, I mean, Bowles is such a smooth mover. The natural tools, I mean, there's a reason he went in the first round. So, yeah, Wilkinson, he's got a spot on this line. He's got a restricted free agent next year, obviously, but he does seem overmatched at right tackle, just putting it point blank.
Right. And it's just, and part of it is, I'm not trying to make excuses for them. They have played some really good defensive lines to start the season. I mean, there's no getting around it. Playing Mack, playing the Smiths, playing, I'm trying to think, I guess.
Farrell?
Yeah, Farrell, I guess you could say him.
Hurst?
Yeah, some of those guys. I mean, but still, yeah, they've played some tough competition, but still, you
Bears
got
and Packers defenses might be top 10 by the end of the year.
I agree. Yeah, they're showing it. I said on this podcast a long time ago, I thought the Packers were one of the most underrated teams in football, and especially their defense. I thought they really amped it up this year, going and getting Amos, the two Smiths, and of course their draft picks. And I mean, it just sets up well for them to be successful moving forward. But I mean, it was for the offensive tackles, especially not a great game. Flacco, it seemed like when anything started going well, a sack would come up. They would, I mean, and I'll talk about this here in a little bit. I mean, the offense was moving the ball against that defense.
I mean, they had so many third down conversions and yardage and whatnot. Like, you see the building blocks of how good this offense can be. It's improving. There are pieces there, but it's just not all cohesive yet.
Right.
And that was always something, I mean, a lot of people talked about, like, man, if this Broncos team can survive the early onslaught of the schedule, well, you're going to have all these new variables and new schemes working their kinks out, then this team could be competitive this year. But if it takes, 4 to 8 weeks for the offensive line to gel, for the offensive system to gel, for the communication and the coverages and how they roll over those to gel, then this is a transition season.
Right.
And you see the flashes, especially on offense. I'm a little bit more concerned about the horses on defense, to be completely honest. But on offense, you can see it building there. It's just not there yet. So that honestly has me encouraged, because the offensive caliber we've seen the past 4 seasons has been absolutely dreadful.
Yep.
I mean, just cover your eyes, children, bad.
Right. And even the play calling is so much improved.
I agree.
And I'm sure we'll talk about that more as we go through this. But now let's get back to stock up. Devontae Bosby. I've been pounding the table for this guy for a while here on this podcast. And Yadam struggled early in the game, got pulled. Bosby comes in. And while he gave up a few catches, he only gave up, I think, a little over 20 yards of receiving. And he looked aggressive. He looked like he knew what he was doing with his job, understood the play calling, everything, and just looks like a guy that belongs out there. And so it really would not surprise me, especially if Callahan can't go this week, if Bosby gets the chance to be the starter opposite of Harris. Yeah,
I mean, he probably should, right? Like, Yadam is a guy, he doesn't have that click and close and doesn't have great recovery speed. So what does that mean? You're going to have to play him a little bit more conservatively. Otherwise, you're going to risk him getting beat over the top. And you just can't do that. You can't do that in a zone scheme. So what do? They play him off a little bit, and teams play him underneath. And you're seeing him give up a fair amount of yardage underneath because of this, where he is a solid guy in space as far as tackling goes. I mean, on tape, where Bosby has not been. But Bosby has click and close and length and stuff that Yadam doesn't have. So, I still think Yadam deserves reps, because, again, that's a position that you really do need to evaluate, because life post Chris Harris Jr. is coming sooner than later. So you need to figure out what you have in Yadam and if he can improve. But I think Bosby does deserve reps. So that's my take, at least.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think, just especially with where this team is at, Bosby is the better fit, because you need a big turnover. This team needs something to just give them some kind of spark in a game, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where they just really they've been decent in some aspects and terrible in other aspects. This is a very complicated defense to kind of figure out right now, because you have the whole no turnovers, no sacks so far this year, yet they're one of the best third down defenses in football right now. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it is. It's just kind of a crazy, weird way of how this defense is going. But anyway, again, yeah, Bosby, I think he's one of those guys that, especially with that click and close speed, like you said, the instincts that he has, I think he could just be in there to make a big play for this defense. So I'm hoping he gets more reps. And yeah, I mean, Yadam's still going to get reps. There's no getting around that. You're still going to have a lot of 3 cornerback sets. Callahan, there's no telling how long he's going to be out or if he even plays this year. I mean, there's rumors circulating that they just might shut him down for the year and say, well, this sucks, but wait for next year.
Yep, I'm with you there, and big stock up for me in this game. He only played, let me see, it's 49% of the snaps, but I think Jeff Hireman had himself his best game of the season. Yes, he's the tight end too, but he had struggled weeks 1 and 2, along with Noah Fant, specifically in the blocking game. Pass blocking, run blocking, neither of them are doing a good job. Well, we saw the Broncos' run offense start to gel a little bit this week, and I think a big part of it was Hireman. I think he did a good job blocking on the edge at second level, and if he can play better in that role, that will hopefully help solidify the run game a little bit more, help settle down the offensive line, and make it that Fant can play more of that F tight end position in comparison to the Y, which is more of the inline guy. So Hireman in the blocking game, somewhat in the pass game, I thought he played his best game of the season. I think Pro Football Focus might have had him graded as the best player on the offense too, which I think Courtland Sutton was the best player on the offense, but whatever. So Hireman stock up there, and hopefully he can continue to be solid there so he can complement Noah Fant and the Broncos can do a little bit better job from 12 personnel going forward.
I like it. All right. Well, now going to the other side again here, looking at the stock down. And this is a guy, I mean, I hate to nitpick too much, but part of it is, I mean, he's supposed to be the spark for the offense, Emmanuel Sanders. And he did have a pretty rough game. Yes, he was going against one of the best cornerbacks in football possibly right now.
Put some respect on that name,
okay.
Jair Alexander.
Okay. Alexander, he is a very good cornerback. I remember you hyping him up when he was coming out of the draft. You really turned me on to him of just saying, dude, you got to watch this guy. And so far he's proven you right. And so I understand Sanders had a very, very tough matchup. But at the same time, you need your best players to make the plays. And Sanders not only didn't make some plays, he cost them some plays. That holding penalty on the touchdown, again, the Broncos were finally building up some momentum and looking like they could really take over this game. They had tied it up on the drive before, 7-7. Green Bay marches down, scores a field goal. And then the Broncos go on this huge run. I can't remember how many plays were, 15-play drive. 63 yards, 7.5 minutes of time used up, just really running it down their throats. And really, his holding penalty, it's one of those, I don't know if Alexander even makes that play. I don't.
Probably not, although give credit to Alexander, he is very aggressive in the run game, and his click and close is strong. So he's a little bit limited by his frame and some injury history there. But
right.
He might have. Like he's that level athlete. So,
right. And I get that.
It was very ticky-tacky still, though.
And I get that. But it was going to be first and goal at the 5, if he made that play. And again, the team has great momentum going, and then you got this huge penalty to take it back. Yes, they still picked up another first down and should have scored, but it just kind of took the air out of the drive, in my opinion. And so, again, when this is supposed to be your top player on offense, your leader, just that play right there just destroyed things. Because, that's a 14-10 game. And the defense, the next play, holds the Packers to a 3-and-out. So you think about that, 14-10, 3-and-out, just things are looking so good. And it just fell apart from there. Because then that's when they had the strip sack for the fumble touchdown right before the half. And so instead of a 14-10, 17-10 kind of game going into halftime, you got a 17-10 game for the Packers. So, I don't want to pick on just one play, but it was such a big moment in the game. And, so it wasn't Sanders' best game by far, for sure. Again, like I said, he did have a tough matchup, but, big players show up in big games.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Stock down for me. Just the interior defensive line as a whole. Adam Gotsis has had some flashes and done well in the run game, but it's still, from a second-round pick, you're going to hope for a little bit more, especially in his fourth year in the league. I mean, he just turned 27, I believe, yesterday, so the time is now, friend, and just hasn't really stepped up into that role that you hope for a true three-down kind of lineman. He's more of that run-stuffing type. And at 27 years old, fourth year in the system, it's fair to start to ask, what is that next level, or is he just what he is? Shelby Harris, some good plays, but definitely feels miscast at that nose tackle position, at least in base. I think he's better in a four-down lineman front or sub-package where, let him one gap. I just don't see the length or the ability to control blockers to two gap, and if they move him over to the defensive end position to fill in for Wolf for a bit, you might see a little bit better there, but still, I don't know if I love him in this scheme, at least in base package. And Wolf going down, I think Wolf was our best defensive lineman so far this season, so that really stinks. He's also probably the highest energy guy, so that's unfortunate. And then the backups, saw some flashes from Jones, but DeMarcus Walker, he stunk again. So, it's just a bunch of guys who are just, who's the difference maker there, who are the other opponent? If you can just run Chubb and Vaughn, or they're only sending one of those guys because they're dropping the other in coverage, who are you sliding protection to? You double one of those guys, and then it's, where am I going? So not offering enough in the run game or pass game, a combination of both. I'm just wanting more from them. And maybe this is stemming from just a little bit of bitterness in the Broncos not walking away with one of my three favorite interior defensive linemen in the draft last year. Obviously Quentin Williams went 3, not going to happen. Ed Oliver went 9, which I predicted was going to happen in December, which was unfortunate. And then Jeffrey Simmons went 19, which who knows if the Broncos would have gone with him if he was there at 20. Not even playing this year, but man, what a phenomenal talent. So interior defensive line really leaving me wanting, and that's one of the reasons the Broncos, you haven't seen them do great in the turnover department today. Turnover and sack department. It's just the interior defensive line doesn't have a difference maker right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's a tough group to watch right now on some things. And even what you would think would be their strength in some of the run game stuff, they still have their struggles at times. They're just inconsistent. And so it's a very tough group to watch. But again, getting back to the positive, Justin Simmons. This is 2 games in a row that I felt like he has put really good film out there. I think he only gave up 1 catch for 4 yards in this game when he was in coverage. And then he's still doing that, coming down, helping in the run game, being very aggressive. He's cleaning up a lot of things, and he's actually looking consistent. That was, I think, our biggest concern with him really since he came in the league. He's always had those flashes. The issue has always been just he doesn't always look like he knows what he's doing out there, can get out of position. Well, at least 2 games in a row here, he's looked very, very consistent on the field. So, if I had to pick one player that could be leaving the Broncos after this season to re-sign, it might be Justin Simmons right now.
Eric and I had a little back and forth today on Justin Simmons not being great this season, being a league average guy. I think he's had some flashes, but he's also had some lows, so hopefully it'll start to come together for him. But, he's a guy that this team, as far as defensive blue chip, building block players, young ones, it's Bradley Chubb and who? Right? Right. Obviously, with the offense being so poor, they've used a lot of resources, early draft capital, to help correct the offense, and we're starting to see flashes of that come together. Probably still a bit out, but if you can't see the potential, then you're just too stuck on the result of the game itself and not evaluating the tape. So, but on defense, I'm a little bit more concerned. That's let me see who my next stock up is before I go in there. Okay, never mind. I can talk about it. But Josie Jewell, I think he's playing better this year. He looks improved, looks better in coverage. So maybe he's a guy that can be good, but is he a building block player? I don't think so. Adam Gotsis, 27 years old already, came out older, Aussie player, was solid starter, but is he a difference maker? No. So really, it's Bradley Chubb and who? Honestly, who?
I mean, other than maybe Justin Simmons getting there eventually, the only other name that I could see that at least, I mean, and this is like, again, very, very limited reps. I still keep saying Bosby is such a perfect fit for this defense.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of those guys that, I mean, you saw it with Fangio and Chicago. The cornerbacks that they got before he came in, a lot of them were kind of thinking of being bust or at least league average. And they come in and their first team all-pro kind of talent. And I just feel like Bosby's one of those guys that, because he is that perfect fit, because he has that gifted ability to turn over the ball, I just think that he could really emerge as somebody that everybody's going, how did everybody miss on this guy?
Yeah.
So
I'm hopeful. If it's not him, you probably got to look at the 2019 draft class.
Right.
And Draymond Jones or Justin Hollins or maybe Malik Reed even, but they had linebacker and cornerback and safeties. The back seven, I mean, I'm not sure right now, so we'll see. Anyway, probably getting a little bit of upside pig here, or a guy who's, I mean, he hasn't broken off a 10-yard run yet this season that hasn't been called back by penalty, but the energy, the running, the decisiveness, the ability in the pass game, which still is a work in progress, but seen flashes there. Phillip Lindsay, stock up for me. Not great the first 2 weeks, but he definitely brought energy this week and is a player that the Broncos need to figure out. If he's not running well, how can we get this guy the ball in space? So hopefully he'll continue to improve in the pass game. There was that pass against Joe Flacco missed that pass on the left side to Courtland Sutton, which could have been a touchdown. Lindsay did a pretty horrific job picking up the free edge rusher. Granted, it was a free edge rusher, and Lindsay is not very big, so that's, how much can you expect at that point? But, it's stuff like that. But still, stock up, running hard, being more involved in the pass game, and I think that big run is just around the corner. It's not here yet, but it's just around the corner, especially the offensive line starting to gel a little bit more and more, and also Jano coming back soon.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's definitely close. It's one extra block away. And Lindsay's, obviously showing he's still got that speed. He's still got that ability to make one guy miss. And so I'm excited to watch him moving forward. Hoping Royce Freeman, he showed a little more hesitancy this week. I mean, that shoulder injury, it just kind of looked like he was struggling to really want to hit the hole like he was earlier in the first two games. But I need both those guys to continue to emerge and bring a strong run game for the Broncos because, they have to be a balanced team on offense. And they've done so good at it this year so far. They just have to continue down that process. But with that, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more of just looking at the entire team as a whole.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and welcome back to Building the Broncos. I'm Carl with Nick, as we are back together again. And again, just appreciate Eric filling in for me this last week. I haven't had a chance to listen to the episode. How'd he do?
He did quite well.
Okay.
He is definitely, obviously always had good insight as far as the Broncos go, good football mind, but his time with the Dove Valley Deep Divers and his work also, I believe, in his Periscopes on Twitter have definitely improved his ability to narrate and just give articulated thoughts through his voice.
Great. Good.
As I stumble across that sentence.
Okay. Well, I told him he can't take my job, so
yeah.
Not today. But we talked about this last week a little bit, and I thought this was kind of a good conversation that we had. Obviously we got the stock up, stock down, just looking at individual players, but this is now looking at the team as a whole. What has stuck out to you when it comes to what seems to be improving as the season goes on for you, that you just sit there and say, wow, this is kind of nice. We haven't had this for a while.
Well, for me, it had to be the usage of both the tight ends and running backs in the pass game and seeing how they're getting utilized when, Broncos have been struggling with utilizing more than one wide receiver, it seems, in these games. Sanders was blanketed this game. Haven't heard a peep from Deshaun Hamilton, it seems like. But Fant, even despite his bad fumble, rookie mistake, again, going back to that sink or swim talk, I thought that it was his best game. They're starting to utilize him in the yak game, short passes and then letting that athleticism go. I mean, if you can isolate him against a linebacker, that's the way to go. We're not seeing it down the field yet, but granted, I feel like they feel a bit hamstrung by the edges blocking right now, so they need to keep Fant back there to at least chip a lot of times. So until those tackles are better, then you're probably not going to fully realize Fant's potential as far as a vertical passing threat. But still, I think it's starting to come together there. And then the running backs as well. I mean, Royce Freeman, Phillip Lindsay, neither are going to mistake anybody for Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey in the pass game. But the fact that they're being utilized there means that other teams are going to have to at least take that threat seriously. It's going to make them adjust coverages. And hopefully those guys will just continue to improve there and become better weapons in the pass game. Neither of them look totally natural right now, especially the route running aspect or hauling in the ball and just that smooth transition from route runner to ball carrier. It's not there quite yet. Maybe it won't get there this year, but it does seem like they are at least making a concerted effort to get them there.
Right.
So excited about those other guys in the pass game getting some utilization.
Right. I mean, Courtland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders, great 1-2 punch for the Broncos at receiver, but like you've said on the show, somebody else has to emerge. And it really was nice seeing Noah Fant make some great catches. He had that one in tight coverage that just really impressed me because he's been known to drop some of those in the past. And I mean, the fumble, it's going to happen sometimes. He's just got to learn, one, don't carry the ball in your left hand when you're running towards the middle of the field from the right side. That's just asking for a fumble to happen. But, I mean, those are things he'll learn. But you can see now some of the things that are starting to click for him. And like I said, yeah, the running backs getting into the pass game. You had 8 catches between the 2 running backs. That's pretty impressive, actually, because there were times I wondered if the Broncos would even have 8 receptions from the running backs the entire season, with how little they ever used them in the pass game. So definitely good to see. What I think is just really improving is, I would say, the third down offense and defense. I mean, week 1, both of those struggled big time. They had a lot of long third down plays. They had a lot of short third downs on defense that they were giving up. Well, it seems like things are starting to reverse in that sense. They are showing consistency in the run game, so they're getting to a lot of third and short plays of 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, and they're picking them up. I mean, that was something last year. I think we joked about it on this show a lot, that Broncos would get to 3rd and 1, and they'd run 4 vertical sets. And you're just going, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I mean, I know your defenses probably aren't expecting you to run that many verticals, but at the same time, when your offensive line is struggling and your quarterback isn't doing that great in the pocket, that's usually not going to be a recipe for success. And so this year, they're doing a lot of great things to pick up those first downs. They're having routes that run a little bit beyond the first down, sometimes bring them back just that little bit. Just sets up so well. And so the offense, they went 8 of 15. Defense held the Packers to 2 of 9. And just, again, they're getting a lot more and more consistent in those areas. And when you can do that, you can sustain those drives. I think the Broncos are actually leading the NFL in time of possession. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so. They are moving the ball. And again, people look at the bottom line, which again, it's about scoring points in this league. I get it, but they're moving the ball. It looks and feels so different than the complete ineptitude that we've seen the past few years.
Right.
It's not there yet. And when you're not getting a lot of, game-breaking plays, you don't really have game-breaking speed on the outside. The offensive line isn't really sustaining blocks in that way. You're not getting the broken plays from the quarterback. I get it. They're not having those, but the offense is functioning. The offense is moving the ball, which, I mean, that's why you brought Flacco in. That's why you brought Scangarello in. So it's not there yet. It's still probably an offensive lineman or 2 away, maybe another weapon away, especially life post Sanders. Maybe it's not going to be Flacco. Maybe it'll be Locke, although Flacco's playing top 15 quarterback level right now. Granted, there's a lot of injuries, but it just looks so improved. And I know a lot of people are very much in their own narratives about how much they dislike Flacco or the Broncos offense sucks, blah, 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 blah. It's much closer than people want to let on.
Right. This is much closer to a 24 to 26 points per game kind of offense than a 16 to 18 point offense. And so, yeah, I mean, like I've said, they are a play or two away. They've had a couple touchdowns called back because of penalties, drop touchdowns. I mean, they're just those little things that they got to clean up, that once those happen, and that'll come with more time in this offense, more time, everybody getting comfortable. So yeah, like I said, I'm very, very impressed with this offense and how they're moving the football. And like I said, it could be just a little bit of, because we've seen something so terrible that even average looks really good. And they're heading in that direction of at least becoming an average offense here in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. So it's about the little things, just getting a little better every single week. So definitely big on that. 0-3 sucks, but there are things here to be excited about. So we're going to definitely touch on those. However, we got to take another quick break, folks. We will be right back. Do not go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell, along with Carl Dumler. We are in the stock report episode of the series we like to do for Building the Broncos. And so far, talked about the stocks, talked about some stuff that the Broncos have improved upon, what works. But Carl, we're going to close out this last segment here before we get down out of here. Since the odds of the Broncos making the playoffs are at, I think it's about 2% for teams that start the season 0-3, and given the Broncos' gauntlet of a schedule, playoffs are probably out the window. You never know. There's a lot of teams that are 1-2 in the AFC, but probably not likely. Let's look ahead a little bit more individually, talking about the stuff that we can look at, that we can build upon, and 3 players that you have highlighted for the rest of the season as guys to watch as far as it pertains to the health of this Broncos roster going forward.
Well, I mean, I have to start with the guy that I've had twice now on my stock up report, Courtland Sutton. I mean, how much I love to watch wide receivers and what they do on the field. And this guy, he really is. He's showing so much improvement from last year. Route running, ability to make the tough catches in traffic. And it's not just, he can make the tough catches with the jump balls, but I'm talking about the passes over the middle, the ones where Flacco's hitting him on stride to be able to move down the field. And picking up the tough first downs. He wasn't doing all that much last year. And I mean, we've talked about it on this show of the Broncos really, I mean, I still think they need a receiver, but I don't think receiver is maybe the top need because of how Sutton is looking. And some of it is also that other positions are showing that they're a bigger need right now, like offensive tackle. But I mean, because Sutton's emerging, it's becoming where you don't need a true number 1, maybe. You need maybe that number 2. And that's a lot easier to find than a true number 1, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's true. However, it's kind of like cornerback, the antithesis of cornerback, right? Like, you're starting 2.5 in today's league. So if you move on from Sanders, and with how little Hamilton, Winfrey, and who am I forgetting? Patrick on IR this season, probably not coming back, have shown it's probably a position of need still where it depends on how the board falls. And obviously what you do in free agency is going to make an impact.
Right.
But you don't really need that true pivot guy. I still don't know if Sutton is a volume target, though, just because how he plays so far away from the middle of the field. Typically, teams are trending more towards higher volume, move the chains targets, and you're getting more explosive plays from outside the hash marks.
Right.
So you got to find somebody to complement him for the long term, because I was definitely a fan of Hamilton when they drafted him, but I'm not seeing it so far.
Oh, I was one of his biggest fans. And
where is it?
I know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with him. It's very frustrating that he is not making, I mean, even when he's had his opportunities, he's not making the plays. So it's very frustrating. But it is good to see Courtland Sutton emerging and becoming somebody that is a true threat in the NFL that teams have to plan for every single game. And it's nice to see that he's doing different things. I mean, you saw the deep ball in this game where he made the nice catch, obviously big 50-plus yard play. But you're also seeing the comeback routes. You're seeing the in routes, the slants, the out routes. You're seeing it all now. And he just couldn't do most of that last year. He really was run deep or fake run deep, come back to the ball. That was pretty much all he could do on the field. And so, again, I mean, just nice to see him emerging. And like you said, receiver is still a need. But I think it's one of those, you don't have to go out there and use some huge draft capital, like our first round pick to feel good about the receiving options on this team. This is going to be a pretty deep draft at wide receiver from everything that I'm starting to see. I know you start yours much earlier than I do. I've just in the last couple of weeks started my draft content and looking at players and trying to watch what's going on in the field. And so, yeah, of course I start with receiver. And so I'm liking what I'm seeing. And I think there are a lot of guys that you can go find and say, okay, well, we got Sutton who can do these things. Let's go find that high volume receiver that can work over the middle, that can be quick in and out of his routes. I mean, pretty much what you hoped Hamilton would be, but a little bit more.
Hamilton offers little to no vertically down the field or after the catch.
Right. That's why I'm saying you need a little bit more than what he brings to the field. But and then another guy that, like we've already talked about in this episode, that is emerging, Noah Fant. I mean, again, the fumble was bad, but it is nice to see him as a route runner. I still want to see a little bit more as a blocker. He still seems a little bit slow, just trying to figure out what his role is as a blocker. But I think once the game starts slowing down, you're going to see that natural physical ability that he brings to the field. At Iowa, he was actually a very good blocker. Not elite by any means, but he was still at least a very competent blocker. And that's what the Broncos need from him. So
I want to expand upon that just a little bit. Noah Fant was a solid blocker at Iowa, but he was used mostly as the F tight end, which that guy, you're seeing him move. You're seeing him peel off and get to the second level. You're seeing him working up against linebackers or even getting up against safeties. When he is one-on-one, especially in the pass game against an edge rusher, that is something Iowa did not put him in very often. And he's struggled as far as being that sixth offensive lineman. So he's going to have to get better there, or they're going to have to figure out different ways to use him, because that the way they're using him right now, especially in the pass game, just isn't succinct with what I evaluated on tape from him.
Right.
And ran.
Right. And so, but it's still going to be fun to watch him grow throughout his rookie year and just see what he could be moving forward for the Broncos 2 through 5 in his years with the Broncos. And then 3, Justin Simmons. Again, this defense, possibly losing all 3 starters on the defensive line, possibly needing to replace at least one of the linebackers, off-ball linebackers. You're looking at Chris Harris leaving. You're looking at Callahan still being hurt, and now possibly Simmons leaving. And so it's just a matter of who's worth paying beyond this year. And part of it is other guys just haven't stepped up. But part of it is Simmons has shown, at least, like I said earlier, more consistency than he has in past years. And so right now, my money would be on going with Justin Simmons. It obviously depends on how much money he wants or how much other teams are willing to pay him. But, he's just a guy I'm going to keep my eye on for sure and just kind of see where he ends up at the end of the season. Is he that difference maker, that blue chip player like you were talking about earlier, or is he just another guy that you're trying to look to replace? But so who are your 3 here?
For me, number 1, I already talked to him about him a bit. Don't want to take up too much time, but Dalton Risner, he definitely looks like he belongs out there. I would argue that he's probably been the Broncos' best offensive lineman to start the season, considering the matchup he had against Hicks was, you give a little bit there because of how good Hicks is. So you're starting to see that really come together. There was a play, I think Ben Fennell on Twitter highlighted, where Risner did a good job blocking 2 Packers, which was pretty darn incredible. He's aggressive, he's a tone setter, and he seems like a guy who's already, he's definitely a leader. And obviously they're not really empowering rookies to be leaders in the locker room, but if you get yourself guys with the same mentality and mindset as Dalton Risner, you're not going to question about whether or not, is there untapped potential out there. He's giving it all mentally, physically, squeezing every ounce of ability out of himself. So I'm really excited to see him progress, as well as the chemistry between him and McGovern and Bowles kind of start to improve there as well, especially in the zone blocking scheme. So really excited just to see if he can continue growing and what the Munchak effect is there. Going forward, also, Connor McGovern is one that I'm interested in. He's had some ups and downs, but there is no doubt that he has potential at the center position. Very strong, pretty good anchor. He needs to do a little bit better job as far as his mental processing up the middle. Had Brandon Thorne on last week for a bit, talked about giving up some leakage up the middle with some A-gap blitzers type of thing or stunts. And that's something you do want to watch for there. But I think McGovern is improving. He had a really tough matchup this week against Kenny Clark. And Kenny Clark, that's a guy who's good enough. He's going to get his. You're not expecting a perfect game against McGovern, but I think he's improving there. And he's also another guy that you love the mentality, the attitude. If you can get guys that mimic his tenaciousness, you're going to do fine up there. So McGovern's another one. He might be a guy that, you're talking about Justin Simmons being a guy you want to bring back. McGovern might be a guy you want to bring back. I mean, young, scheme versatile, positional versatile, doesn't have the injury history of a Paradis. That's a guy that if he can keep improving, he's worth retaining just because it's so hard to find offensive linemen. Also, you don't want to be turning over 3 to 4 offensive linemen every year, considering how much chemistry is important between those guys. You can't build a sustainable, successful line that way. And then finally, I touched on it a bit, but Josie Jewell, he's a guy that, I'm an Iowa Hawkeye fan. I'm a big fan of Josie Jewell, number 43 at the University of Iowa, but he's been a guy who I've dogged on a bit as far as being an almost player, a little bit small and a little bit slow. And if you can be a little small if you're fast. You can be a little slow if you're big. And he's just neither of those things, but he looks like the game is slowing down for him a bit. And I thought that Todd Davis next to him, he got stronger as the game went on. You could definitely see that's the case. And I think he was big out there as far as getting this defense kind of moving in that right direction, despite going up against the Packers at Arrowhead. I mean, Broncos, you want to do a better job against Aaron Rodgers with pressures and whatnot, but I thought they did a pretty good job of eliminating a lot of the big things and letting this get out of hand. So Josie Jewell, I think he's playing much better than people give him credit for. And honestly, outside the edge rushers, which again, no sacks and safeties, obviously Kareem Jackson, Justin Smith, I think the combo of Davis and Jewell, I'm much less worried about that than the cornerback depth behind Chris Harris Jr. and the interior defensive line going forward, especially considering the top 3 guys are set to hit free agency. So Jewell and Davis, not great by any means, but more than competent, and you can get a bye with more than competent at linebacker. I think those two are just going to continue to get better in this system, and I think we're going to see a pretty low-scoring game this week, but a pretty good game from the defense this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, all right, well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at milehighhuddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We will see you soon. Despite being 0-3, always going to finish with a Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.